What happens when a carefully crafted public image collides with unscripted questions on live television? What happens when a morning show host refuses to stick to the approved talking points? This morning on Good Morning America, viewers witnessed something absolutely unprecedented. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, sat down with Michael Strahan for what was supposed to be a friendly promotional interview. Instead, what unfolded was a tense, increasingly heated exchange that ended with producers cutting to commercial and Meghan walking off the set. Before we get into exactly what was said that caused this massive fallout, make sure you subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because this is one interview you need to hear in full detail. The interview was scheduled to promote Meghan's latest philanthropic initiative, a project focused on women's literacy programs in developing nations. Standard morning television fare, the kind of segment that usually involves softballs about inspiration and personal growth. Michael Strahan, known for his charismatic yet professional interviewing style, seemed like the perfect host for this kind of conversation. The set was arranged intimately, 2 chairs angled toward each other with that familiar Good Morning America backdrop. Soft lighting designed to make guests look approachable and warm. Meghan arrived on set in an elegant cream-colored blazer, her signature polished look firmly in place. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. Michael opened with congratulations on the literacy initiative, and Meghan responded with practiced talking points about empowerment and access to education. Her media training was evident in every carefully modulated response, every strategic pause, every moment of seemingly spontaneous emotion that felt just a touch too rehearsed. But then Michael shifted gears. "You've spoken a lot about your own narrative and controlling your story," he said, leaning forward slightly. "But there's been some criticism that the version of events you've shared publicly doesn't always align with what other people remember. How do you respond to that?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's smile remained fixed, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I think that's a rather loaded question, Michael," she replied, her voice still controlled, but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "What I've shared has been my truth, my lived experience. If others remember things differently, perhaps that says more about their perspective than mine." Michael nodded, but he didn't back down. "Sure, but when multiple people who were present for the same events tell a different story, doesn't that warrant at least acknowledging that maybe memory is complicated? That maybe there are multiple truths?" "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" Meghan asked, and now the smile was gone entirely. Her posture straightened, shoulders back, chin slightly elevated. It was a defensive stance masked as confidence. "I'm not suggesting anything," Michael responded calmly. "I'm asking how you reconcile your narrative with contradicting accounts from people who were also there. That's journalism. That's what tough conversations look like." Meghan's publicist, sitting just off camera, was now visible in the monitor, leaning forward with concern etched across her face. But Meghan wasn't looking at her publicist. Her focus was entirely on Michael, and the air between them crackled with tension. "Tough conversations," Meghan repeated, her voice dripping with something that might have been contempt or might have been hurt. It was hard to tell. "Is that what we're calling ambush interviews now? Because I was told this would be about literacy programs, about making a difference in the lives of young women around the world. I wasn't told I'd be sitting here defending myself against vague accusations." "They're not vague," Michael countered, and his tone remained professional, but there was steel underneath now. "Several staff members from your time working within the royal institution have gone on record, not anonymously, with their names attached, describing a pattern of behavior that contradicts the victim narrative you've constructed. I think viewers deserve to hear you address that directly." The studio audience, small as it was, had gone completely silent. This wasn't the Good Morning America they were used to, the cheerful cooking segments and celebrity interviews that felt more like friendly chats than actual journalism. This was something else entirely, something raw and unscripted and genuinely uncomfortable. Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Staff members?" she said. "You mean people who were loyal to an institution that has a vested interest in discrediting me? People who were part of a system that I've spoken out against? Of course they're going to say I was difficult. That's how they protect themselves. So everyone who contradicts you is either lying or part of a conspiracy?" Michael asked, and now there was a slight note of incredulity in his voice. "That's a convenient way to dismiss any criticism, isn't it?" "That's not what I said," Meghan snapped, her composure cracking further. "Don't twist my words. What I'm saying is that when you challenge power structures, when you refuse to be silent about racism and institutional cruelty, those structures fight back. They use whatever tools they have, including planting stories, including getting people to go on record with carefully crafted statements that paint you as the villain. But some of these people have provided specific examples. Michael pressed on. Emails, documented incidents, corroborating witnesses. At what point does it stop being a conspiracy and start being a pattern that maybe, just maybe, deserves some self-reflection? Meghan's hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, were now gripping the arms of her chair. "You really did your research, didn't you?" she said, and her voice had gone quiet in a way that somehow felt more dangerous than if she'd been shouting. "Tell me, Michael, did you do this same level of aggressive questioning when you had other members of that family on this show? Or is this special treatment reserved just for me?" Michael didn't flinch. "I ask every guest tough questions when the story warrants it. If you're going to go on international television, write books, do documentaries about how you've been wronged, then yes, I'm going to ask you to back that up, to address the inconsistencies, to explain why your version stands while everyone else's falls. My version stands because it's the truth," Meghan said, her voice rising now. "And the fact that you're sitting here on national television trying to discredit my experiences of racism, of suicidal ideation, of institutional gaslighting, that tells me everything I need to know about where your loyalties lie." "I'm not trying to discredit your experiences," Michael said firmly. "I'm asking you to reconcile them with documented evidence that suggests the story is more complicated than you've presented. That's not an attack, that's journalism." The publicist was now standing, making frantic hand gestures toward the producers in the control room, but the cameras kept rolling. "You want to talk about documented evidence?" Meghan leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Let's talk about the documented evidence of tabloid harassment, of racist coverage, of coordinated media campaigns designed to destroy my reputation before I even had a chance. Let's talk about how convenient it is that all these supposed witnesses came forward only after I started speaking my truth. Where were these emails and documented incidents before that? Why weren't they addressed in real time if they were so concerning?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, but Meghan wasn't finished. "No, you asked your questions. Now I'm going to tell you what this really is. This is exactly what I've been talking about. This is the machine in action." "The machine," Michael repeated, and there was genuine curiosity mixed with skepticism in his tone now. "You keep talking about this machine, this system that's out to get you. But Meghan, you had one of the most powerful platforms in the world. You married into one of the most famous families on the planet. You had access to resources, to protection, to influence that most people can only dream of. And you walked away from it. That was your choice. So help me understand, if you were such a victim of this machine, why do you keep coming back to it? Why do the interviews? Why write the books? Why keep the story alive if you just want to move on?" Meghan's jaw tightened. "You think having a platform means you can't be mistreated? You think being visible means you deserve whatever comes your way? That's exactly the kind of logic that allows abuse to continue. And I keep telling my story because other people need to hear it. Because other women, especially women of color, need to know they're not alone when they face these systems." "But that's just it," Michael said. And he was leaning forward now to the space between them shrinking. "You position yourself as speaking for women of color, for victims of institutional racism. But then when women of color who worked for you come forward and say they had negative experiences, suddenly they're liars, or they're part of the conspiracy. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim to speak for marginalized voices and then dismiss those same voices when they don't support your narrative." The color rose in Meghan's cheeks. "Those women didn't come forward on their own, Michael. They were pushed, they were prompted, they were given legal support and media training by people who wanted to undermine me. There's a difference between someone genuinely sharing their experience and someone being weaponized as part of a smear campaign." "How do you know that?" Michael challenged. "How do you know what their motivations were? Isn't it possible, even remotely possible, that they had legitimate grievances? That maybe in the midst of your own very real struggles, you might have been difficult to work with? That doesn't make you a monster, Meghan. It makes you human. But refusing to even consider that possibility, that's what people find troubling." "People find it troubling," Meghan said slowly. "Or you find it troubling. Because I'm sitting here wondering whose agenda is really being served by this line of questioning. I came here to talk about literacy, about helping girls in Africa and Asia get access to education, and instead, you've turned this into a character assassination. No one's assassinating your character, Michael responded, his voice still level, but with unmistakable firmness. I'm asking you to account for the gap between what you say and what others report. That's not assassination, that's accountability. And frankly, if you can't handle these questions in a controlled environment like this, how do you expect people to take seriously your claims about handling much worse? That landed like a physical blow. Meghan actually recoiled slightly, her eyes widening. Excuse me. You've talked about the immense pressure you were under, the toll it took on your mental health, and I don't doubt that was real, Michael continued. But you're also someone who's chosen to remain in the public eye, who's built a brand around your story, who's profiting from your narrative. So when you face legitimate questions about inconsistencies in that narrative, shutting down and claiming victimhood doesn't work anymore. People see through it. People see through it, Meghan repeated, and now there was something dangerous in her voice, something that suggested the careful control was about to snap entirely. Or the media has done such a thorough job of poisoning the well that, no matter what I say, no matter what evidence I provide, people have already made up their minds. You talk about accountability, Michael, but where's the accountability for the press that hounded me? Where's the accountability for the family members who briefed against me? Where's the accountability for the institutional racism that made my life unbearable? The press has been held accountable, Michael said. You've won lawsuits, publications have been forced to apologize, there have been consequences. As for the family, they've maintained a dignified silence while you've done interview after interview, documentary after documentary. At some point, you have to ask yourself if maybe the reason they're not engaging is because they know that responding would just fuel more drama, more headlines, more content for you to monetize. The studio had become so quiet you could hear the ambient hum of the equipment. Meghan's publicist was now in animated conversation with a producer, both of them looking increasingly panicked. But neither Michael nor Meghan seemed aware of anything except each other. Dignified silence, Meghan said, and she actually laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Is that what we're calling it? Not dignified silence, Michael. Strategic silence. They stay quiet because they know the institution will do their dirty work for them. They stay quiet because people like you will do exactly what you're doing right now, questioning me, doubting me, making me prove my pain, while they get to sit back and look noble. Or maybe they stay quiet because they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, Michael countered. If they defend themselves, they're attacking you. If they stay silent, they're complicit. You've created a no-win situation, where any response other than complete validation of your version of events is treated as an attack. That's not fair, Meghan, and you know it. Fair. Meghan's voice went up an octave. You want to talk to me about fair? Was it fair that I had to read about my own father's staged photos in the tabloids? Was it fair that I was blamed for it? Was it fair that I was called difficult and demanding for asking for the same support that was freely given to others? Was it fair that my son wasn't going to receive security or a title because of concerns about how dark his skin might be? Where was your commitment to fairness then, Michael? Those are serious allegations, Michael said, and his tone had shifted slightly, becoming more measured. And when you first made them, they sparked important conversations about racism in institutions. But since then, details have emerged that complicate the story. The question about your son's skin tone, multiple people have said that wasn't said in the context you implied. The security arrangements experts have explained that those decisions are based on protocols, not personal vendettas. The titles, there are actual rules about who gets them and when. So yes, I believe you experienced racism. I believe you felt isolated and unsupported. But I also think you've taken real experiences and woven them into a narrative that's more dramatic, more sinister than what actually happened. Meghan stood up abruptly, and for a moment it seemed like she might actually walk off the set right then. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, her hands clenched at her sides. You have no idea, she said, her voice shaking with barely contained fury, what it was like. You have no idea what I went through, what I survived. And for you to sit there, comfortable and safe, and completely removed from it, and tell me that I've exaggerated my own trauma? That's beyond insulting, Michael. That's cruel. Michael remained seated, looking up at her. Sit down, Meghan. Please, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to have an honest conversation. Isn't that what you've always said you wanted? Honesty, transparency, real talk about difficult subjects. Not like this, Meghan said, but she didn't sit back down. She stood there, visibly struggling to regain her composure. Not when the entire framing is designed to make me look unreasonable. You've already decided I'm the problem, Michael. This whole interview has been a setup. It's not a setup, Michael said, standing now as well, and the two of them faced each other across the space where the chairs sat. It's a conversation you should have been prepared to have. You've made serious accusations against powerful people, against centuries-old institutions, and you've done it on the world stage. Did you think there would never be follow-up questions? Did you think you could just say whatever you wanted and no one would ever push back? Push back is one thing, Meghan shot back. This is an interrogation, and the fact that you don't see the difference tells me everything. When other guests come on this show, when they talk about their struggles, you nod sympathetically, you affirm their experiences, you create a safe space for them to share. But with me, it's cross-examination. With me, it's doubt and skepticism and demands for proof. And we both know why that is, do we? Michael asked quietly. Why don't you tell me why you think that is? Because I threatened the wrong people, Meghan said, her voice dropping to something almost intimate in its intensity. Because I dared to say that racism exists in places people want to believe are above such things. Because I refused to suffer in silence like I was supposed to. Because I'm a woman who married up and then had the audacity to not be grateful enough, accommodating enough, quiet enough, or because your story has holes in it, Michael said, matching her quiet intensity, because people who were there say things happened differently, because your own family members, on both sides, have contradicted key parts of your narrative. My family, Meghan said, and now her voice carried a note of genuine pain underneath the anger. You mean the father who sold stories about me to the press, the half-sister I barely know who's made a career out of attacking me on television. Those family members. Because if we're going to talk about credibility, Michael, let's talk about the credibility of people who profit from tearing me down. But it's not just them, Michael pressed. Former friends, former colleagues, people who have nothing to gain and arguably a lot to lose by speaking out. They've painted a picture of someone who's very different from the person you present to the world. Someone who's calculating, who's manipulative, who rewrites history to suit whatever narrative benefits them in the moment. How do you explain that? Meghan's eyes flashed. I explain it the same way anyone who's been smeared explains it. People lie, Michael. People misremember. People get pressured. And people especially love to take down women who don't play by the rules. Every successful woman who's ever dared to advocate for herself has faced exactly this kind of coordinated attack. It's a playbook that's been used over and over again. And the fact that you're falling for it, that you're participating in it, is deeply disappointing. I'm not falling for anything, Michael said, and there was an edge of frustration creeping into his voice now. I've done my homework. I've looked at the evidence. I've talked to people off the record who were there, and what I keep finding is that your version of events is the outlier, Meghan. It's not everyone else who's lying. It's not everyone else who's misremembering. The common denominator in all of these contradictions is you. The words hung in the air between them like a grenade with a pin pulled. Meghan's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, fury, something that might have been hurt, before settling into a mask of cold dignity. The common denominator is me, she repeated slowly. Well, Michael, I think we're done here. I came to talk about helping children learn to read, and instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination based on gossip and lies from people with axes to grind. This isn't journalism, it's a hit piece, and I won't sit here and participate in my own destruction. Running away doesn't make the questions go away, Michael said, and his voice had gone quiet again. You can walk off this set, you can go on social media and claim you were ambushed. You can tell your supporters that this was all unfair. But the questions remain, Meghan. The inconsistencies remain. And until you're willing to actually address them, instead of just dismissing everyone who raises them as part of some vast conspiracy against you, people are going to keep doubting your story. Let them doubt, Meghan said, reaching up to remove her microphone. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. I know my truth. I know what I lived through. And I don't need validation from you or from anyone else who's already made up their mind. History will vindicate me, Michael. Just like it's vindicated every other woman who was called difficult and demanding and manipulative, for refusing to accept mistreatment. History vindicated those women because they were telling the truth, Michael said, and because when challenged, they could back up their claims with facts, not just feelings. That's the difference here. You want the credibility that comes with being a truth-teller, but you're not willing to do the work that actual truth-telling requires. You want people to just believe you because you said it, and when they don't, you cry persecution. Meghan had the microphone off now, the wire dangling from her hand. "I've done the work," she said. "I've shared my story despite knowing it would bring more hatred, more scrutiny, more attacks. I've put myself out there, even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. That's the work, Michael. Having this conversation with you, knowing you came in here determined to discredit me, that's the work. And I'm done doing it for an audience that's already decided I'm the villain." "No one decided you're the villain," Michael said, but Meghan was already turning away. "People just want consistency. They want honesty. They want you to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you're not the only victim in this story, that maybe you also made choices that hurt people. That maybe your truth isn't the only truth." Meghan stopped, her back still to Michael, and for a moment it seemed like she might turn around, like there might be one final exchange. But then her shoulders squared, and she kept walking toward the edge of the set where her publicist waited, pale and anxious. Michael remained standing there watching her go. "Meghan," he called out, and there was something almost pleading in his voice now, the professional detachment cracking just slightly. "This doesn't have to be how this ends. Sit back down. Let's have a real conversation, not as interviewer and subject, but as two people trying to understand a complicated situation. I'm not your enemy." She paused again, and when she turned back to look at him, her expression was unreadable. "You're not my enemy," she agreed quietly, "but you're not my friend either, Michael. You're just another person who's decided that my pain is less important than your ratings, that my trauma is less real than someone else's denial of it. And that's fine. I've dealt with worse, but I don't have to stand here and take it, and I won't." "This isn't about ratings," Michael protested. "This is about truth, about getting to the bottom of a story that's been told one way by you and another way by nearly everyone else who was involved. Don't you think people deserve to know what really happened?" "People deserve to know what really happened," Meghan repeated, and now there was something almost sad in her voice. "But they won't learn it from you, Michael, because you've already decided what really happened. You decided it before I walked onto this set. This entire interview has been about confirming what you already believed, not about discovering the truth. So yes, I'm walking away. Not because I can't defend myself, but because there's no point in defending yourself to someone who's already made up their mind." The publicist had reached her now, murmuring urgently in her ear, trying to guide her away from the cameras that were still rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented breakdown. But Meghan shrugged off the guiding hand, turning back to Michael one last time. "You want to know what the real story is here?" she asked, and her voice carried across the studio with perfect clarity. "The real story is that a woman spoke up about her mistreatment, about racism, about institutional cruelty, and instead of being believed, instead of being supported, she was put on trial. Her every word was picked apart. Her every emotion was questioned. Her every claim was met with skepticism and demands for proof that would never be enough. That's the real story, Michael, and you just became part of it." With that, she turned and walked off the set, her publicist hurrying after her, leaving Michael standing alone in the middle of the Good Morning America studio. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing his expression, a complex mix of frustration and something that might have been regret, before finally someone in the control room called for a commercial break. The entire exchange, from that first pointed question about narratives to Meghan's final accusation, had lasted less than 15 minutes. But in that brief window, viewers had witnessed something rarely seen on morning television. Two strong personalities refusing to back down, each convinced of their own righteousness, unable or unwilling to find common ground, no prepared talking points, no careful media training, just raw confrontation and the collision of incompatible truths. As the studio scrambled to figure out how to handle the remaining time in what was supposed to be a half-hour segment, as social media began to explode with clips and commentary, as news organizations started preparing their own coverage of this coverage, one thing was abundantly clear. Whatever Meghan had hoped to accomplish by appearing on Good Morning America, Whatever message she had wanted to send about her literacy initiative, it had been completely overshadowed by those intense minutes of confrontation with Michael Strahan, the questions he raised, the defenses she mounted, the fundamental disconnect between his demand for accountability and her insistence on validation. All of it would be analyzed and debated for days, weeks, perhaps longer. Both sides would claim victory. Both would insist they had been proven right. And the truth, whatever it actually was, would remain as elusive and contested as ever. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. What do you think? Was Michael Strahan right to push back on Meghan's narrative? Or did he cross the line from journalism into attack? Let me know your thoughts.